The forest was silent, but not the kind of silence that feels peaceful. It was the kind of silence that made the skin crawl. The human traveler, known only as Daniel, walked carefully through the glowing trees. The forest was alive with strange lights, blue and green sparks floating in the air like fireflies. He had come to this unknown planet by accident, when his small ship was pulled out of orbit by a strange force. Now he was alone, searching for a way back. As Daniel moved deeper into the forest, he suddenly froze. There was a sound, soft and trembling like the cry of a child. He turned his head quickly, his hand gripping the small blade he carried for protection. The sound came again, this time closer. It was a cry filled with fear, and it made his heart race. Pushing through a curtain of glowing vines, Daniel found something that made him stop breathing. There, sitting on the ground, was a child. The child was small, maybe no older than 6 or 7 in human years. Its skin was pale silver, its eyes glowing like twin moons, and small patterns shimmered across its arms like living tattoos. It was clear this child was not human, yet the tears running down its face were the same as any frightened child's tears. The child looked up at him. Trembling, Daniel knelt down slowly, trying not to scare it more. "Hey, it's okay," he whispered, though he knew the child might not understand his words. But to his surprise, the child blinked, then reached a tiny hand toward him. The hand shook, but the meaning was clear. It wanted help. Daniel lifted the child. Gently, the child wrapped thin arms around his neck. Clinging tightly, Daniel could feel how light it was. How weak. He started walking, unsure where to go. The forest seemed endless, every direction filled with glowing plants and strange symbols, carved into tree bark. But somehow, Daniel felt the child knew the way. The deeper they walked, the stronger the feeling grew that something was watching them. Shadows shifted in the distance, and glowing eyes flashed between the trees. Yet no creature attacked. It was as if the forest itself was testing him, waiting to see what he would do. Daniel spoke softly as he walked, even though he knew the child could not understand. "It's all right, kid. I'll get you home," he said. The child did not answer, only rested its glowing head against his shoulder. But every few steps, the child pointed weakly in a direction. Guiding him, Daniel followed, trusting the strange little hand. Hours seemed to pass. The air grew colder, the trees taller. Finally, through the mist, Daniel saw lights ahead, strange floating lanterns that hovered above the ground. He stepped forward and saw it a hidden village. It looked like something out of a dream. Houses shaped from crystal and stone, towers that floated without support, rivers that glowed with silver. Light, aliens moved between them, tall figures with glowing skin and sharp features. They were beautiful, but their eyes were sharp, watching every move with suspicion. The moment Daniel stepped into view, the child in his arms gave a joyful sound. It reached out toward the village, calling in its strange melodic language. At once, several aliens rushed forward, their eyes wide with shock. They surrounded Daniel, not with weapons, but with a kind of cautious awe. The child slipped from his arms and ran into the embrace of one of the adults. Daniel let out a slow breath of relief. He had done the right thing, or so he thought. The villagers did not smile. They looked at him with silent, unblinking eyes. Some whispered to each other in low tones. Others touched the child and then looked at Daniel as though weighing something. Daniel frowned, suddenly uneasy. This was not the welcome he expected. Night fell quickly, and the village glowed with soft blue fire. Daniel was given a place to sit near a strange fire pit. He was not chained or hurt, but neither was he free. To leave, aliens kept watching him, studying every movement, every breath. Daniel noticed the elders of the village sitting apart, their glowing eyes fixed on him. They whispered to one another, their voices carried by the wind. He could not understand their words, but he caught one phrase repeated again and again. A trial. A test. The human's heart pounded. What trial? What test? He had only done what felt natural, help a lost child. But something told him this was only the beginning. The forest, the child, the whispers in the village, all of it was connected. And now Daniel, the lone human, stood at the center of something much larger than himself. As the fire crackled and shadows danced around him, Daniel realized he was being judged, not as a guest, not as a stranger, but as someone who had unknowingly stepped into a challenge that could change his fate forever. Daniel sat near the glowing fire pit. The warmth felt strange, not like normal fire, but softer, almost alive. Blue flames danced without. Wood or smoke, giving off a quiet hum. Around him, the aliens moved carefully, always keeping him in sight. Their faces were unreadable, their glowing eyes sharp like knives. Every whisper, every glance was directed at him. He knew it. He was being studied, maybe even judged. The child he had rescued sat not far away, surrounded by a group of alien adults who checked it carefully. The child smiled and pointed at Daniel again and again. It was almost as if the child was trying to defend him. But the villagers did not seem convinced. Some frowned, others nodded slowly as if debating. Daniel could feel the tension tightening like a rope around his neck. Then an elder stepped forward. The elder was taller than the others, with patterns glowing across the skin like rivers of light. Its voice was deep and echoing. It spoke words Daniel could not understand, but the meaning pressed into his chest like thunder. The elder gestured toward him, then toward the fire. Daniel swallowed hard, not knowing if it was an invitation or a warning. One of the younger aliens placed a crystal bowl before him. Inside it was a glowing liquid, shifting with colors like melted stars. The child watched closely, wide-eyed, as if waiting for him to act. Daniel hesitated, but his thirst was sharp. Carefully, he lifted the bowl and drank. The taste was unlike anything he had known, sweet, bitter, and burning all at once. It spread through his veins like fire, and the world seemed to tilt. For a moment, he thought he saw visions, faces in the flames, battles, leaders crowned with glowing light, and then darkness. When he opened his eyes, he was lying on the ground. The villagers stood in a circle around him, silent, waiting. The child was still beside him, clutching his hand tightly. Daniel sat up slowly, heart racing. Whatever had just happened, it was not a drink. It was a test, and somehow he had survived it. The villagers murmured among themselves. The elder raised one hand, silencing them. Then, without a word, the elder turned and began walking deeper into the village. The others followed, motioning for Daniel to come. Daniel rose to his feet, feeling weak but determined. He had no choice. If he wanted answers, he had to follow. As he walked through the village, Daniel saw wonders he could barely believe. Houses made of crystal that shifted shapes when touched. Bridges woven from glowing vines that hung in the air. Children playing with floating orbs of light that obeyed their every command. And yet, the beauty of the place was wrapped in unease. Every villager he passed stopped and stared at him, some with curiosity, others with distrust. It was as though his very presence was tearing something inside this village apart. They led him to the center of the village. There stood a great stone tower, its walls carved with symbols. The tower reached high into the misty sky, its top hidden. A wide door opened silently as they approached. Inside, the air was colder, heavier. Torches of silver flame lit the walls. The elder gestured for him to step inside. Daniel obeyed, though every part of him screamed caution. The chamber was circular, lined with glowing stones. At the center stood a large platform made of crystal. The elder motioned for him to step onto it. Daniel hesitated, then slowly moved forward. The moment his foot touched the platform, it lit up beneath him. Symbols flared to life, swirling around him like a storm. The villagers gasped softly. The elder's glowing eyes narrowed. And for the first time, Daniel thought he saw approval. But approval was mixed with danger. One villager, tall and broad, stepped forward angrily. It shouted in their strange language, pointing at Daniel with sharp fingers. The crowd murmured louder, voices clashing. The child ran to Daniel's side, clutching his arm as if to protect him. Daniel looked around, heart hammering. He did not understand their words, but he understood the tone. Some of them wanted him gone, maybe even dead. The elder raised both hands, silencing the chaos. Then slowly the elder looked at Daniel and spoke one word, clear and heavy, a word Daniel somehow understood, though he did not know the language. The word was trial. Daniel's blood turned cold. What trial? Why him? He had only helped a lost child, nothing more. Yet now, standing under the glowing stones with all eyes on him, he felt the weight of something enormous. This was no accident. This was a test, one he had already stepped into without knowing, and failure might mean death. The child squeezed his hand tighter, its glowing eyes filled with trust. Daniel realized something then. This child wasn't just lost. This child was the key to everything. The village, the whispers, the trial. It all began with the child, and Daniel had no choice now. He had to see it through. The word trial echoed inside Daniel's mind like a heavy drum. The villagers slowly backed away from the glowing platform, forming a circle around him. Their glowing eyes burned with silent judgment. The elder raised one arm, and the symbols beneath Daniel's feet began to shift. The crystal floor trembled, sending a strange vibration up his legs. Before he could react, the ground split open, revealing a hidden staircase that spiraled downward. Into darkness, the elder pointed to the staircase and spoke a command. Daniel did not understand the words, but he knew the meaning. He was expected to go down. The villagers whispered among themselves, some nodding with grim approval, others shaking their heads. The child, still clutching his sleeve, looked up at him with worried eyes. It said something in its melodic tongue, soft but urgent. Daniel didn't understand, yet he knew what it meant. Be careful. Taking a deep breath, Daniel stepped forward. The staircase swallowed him, the air growing colder with every step. The walls glowed faintly, symbols carved into the stone like veins of light. The whispers of the villagers faded above, replaced by the sound of his own footsteps echoing in the dark. He descended deeper and deeper until the stairs ended in a vast chamber. The chamber was unlike anything he had seen. The ceiling was lost in shadow, but the walls glowed with shifting patterns like living stars. At the center stood 3 doors, each carved from a different material, one of stone, one of wood, and one of metal. Above the doors, a glowing message burned in alien script. Daniel could not read the words, yet somehow he felt their meaning press into his mind. Choose a path, choose a fate. His heart pounded. This was the trial, but which door should he choose? Stone looked strong but unyielding. Wood looked fragile but alive. Metal looked cold but sharp. He closed his eyes, trying to think. Back on Earth, choices were simple. You trusted your gut. So he touched the wooden door, its surface warm beneath. His hand, slowly, it creaked open. Inside was a narrow corridor lit by floating orbs. The air was thick, heavy, and smelled of smoke. He stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind him. The orbs flickered, then flared bright, revealing shapes in the shadows. Daniel froze creatures crawled along the walls, their bodies long and thin, with too many legs and glowing eyes. They hissed softly, their voices merging into whispers. The words were not clear, but the tone was unmistakable mockery. They were waiting, watching, testing. Daniel gripped his small blade tightly. The creatures did not attack. Not yet. Instead, they moved to block his path, forcing him to act. His pulse thundered in his ears, but he forced his legs forward. Every step he took The creatures closed in tighter. One hissed in his ear. Another brushed across his back. But Daniel refused to stop. Fear would not control him, not here. Finally, the corridor opened into a chamber of fire. Flames rose from cracks in the floor, forming walls of heat. At the center stood a tall figure, cloaked in shadow. Its eyes glowed brighter than the flames, and its voice rolled like thunder. "You helped the child," it said, though its mouth never moved. "Do you help because you seek reward, or because you seek nothing?" Daniel's breath caught. The voice was inside his mind. He wanted to answer, but his throat felt locked. The figure stepped closer, the flames bending around it. "Answer," it demanded. Daniel forced himself to speak, his voice raw. "I helped because it was the right thing. No reward. No reason, just because a child needed me." For a long moment, silence hung heavy. Then the flames roared higher, but instead of burning, they parted. The figure raised a hand, and the creatures in the corridor bowed low. "You have passed the first step," the voice echoed. "But many trials remain." The fire dimmed, and Daniel found himself standing at the far end of the chamber. A new staircase rose before him, leading upward. His knees were weak, his throat dry, but he climbed. When he emerged into the light, the villagers were waiting, their eyes locked on him, silent, expectant. The child ran to him, hugging his leg with relief. The elder stepped forward, studying him carefully. Then, in a deep, slow voice, it spoke a single word: "Worthy." The crowd erupted in mixed voices. Some cheered, others shouted angrily. The village was divided. Some wanted him accepted, others wanted him cast out. But Daniel understood something now. This was not just about him. This was about their future, their leadership, their trust. And without knowing it, he had stepped into the heart of their struggle. As night fell again, the whispers grew louder. Daniel sat near the fire pit once more. The child beside him, he stared into the blue. Flames, his mind heavy. This was only the first test, and already he had barely survived. What would the next one bring? The village was restless. That night, Daniel could feel the weight of countless eyes on him. Even as he sat near the glowing fire pit, the villagers did not relax. They whispered in corners, their voices sharp and tense. Some pointed at him. Others shook their heads. It was clear his survival in the first trial had shaken something inside this place. The child refused to leave his side. It clung to him, sitting close, as though afraid that if it let go, something terrible would happen. Daniel looked down at the small, silver-skinned figure and felt a strange connection. This child had led him here, trusted him, defended him before strangers. Why? What made him so important? The question burned in his mind like fire. The elder finally approached. The tall figure's glowing patterns shimmered like rivers of light across the skin. Its voice was deep and heavy as it motioned for Daniel to follow. The villagers parted, some bowing, others glaring. Daniel rose slowly, the child holding his hand as they walked together. They entered the great stone tower once more, the place of trials. But this time, the elder did not lead him downward. Instead, they climbed a hidden staircase that spiraled upward. Every step felt heavier, as though invisible eyes pressed on his shoulders. At last, they reached a chamber at the top. The room was filled with glowing crystals, each one floating gently in the air. Inside the crystals shimmered images, faces, battles, landscapes. Daniel's breath caught. It was like a library of memories, trapped in light. The elder turned and spoke slowly. Daniel did not know the words, but as before, the meaning pressed into his mind. "These are the leaders before you," the voice echoed in his thoughts. "Each chosen by trial, each tested by fire and shadow. The child you carried is no ordinary child. The child is the mark of choice, the key that leads the next leader to us." Daniel's heart pounded. He looked down at the child, who gazed up at him with wide, glowing eyes. A key? A mark of choice? He had thought it was just a lost child, fragile, scared, alone. But now he realized returning it had been the first act of the trial, and he had already stepped into a path he could not leave. The elder gestured, and one of the crystals drifted. Closer, inside it shimmered the image of another human. Daniel's eyes widened. It was a man, tall and scarred, wearing strange armor. The man stood beside alien warriors, leading them into battle. Daniel whispered under his breath, "Another human." "Here?" The elder's voice echoed again. "Long ago, one of your kind passed the trial, but he fell, and the bond was broken. We have waited, watching the stars, waiting for the one who would come again." Daniel felt his chest tighten. He was not the first. Another human had stood here. Another had tried and failed. And now it was his turn. The weight of destiny pressed on him, suffocating. Was this fate or just cruel chance? The child squeezed his hand, pulling him from his storm of thoughts. It whispered something in its soft, melodic tongue. Daniel could not understand the words, but the meaning was clear. It believed in him, for reasons he could not explain. That trust gave him strength. But then, shadows stirred at the edge of the chamber. Another figure stepped forward from the darkness. A tall alien, broad-shouldered, with eyes like burning coals. It spoke harshly, pointing at Daniel, its voice filled with anger. The elder raised a hand to silence it, but the challenger did not stop. Daniel didn't need to know the words. He understood the tone, the fury. This alien did not want him here. This alien would rather see him fail. The elder's voice pressed into his mind again, calm but sharp. "Not all accept you. Some fear you will break us as the last one did. But the trial continues. The truth must be revealed, and you must decide who you are." The crystals flared brighter, and Daniel suddenly saw visions. Himself standing before a crowd, crowned with light, the child grown older, standing at his side, but also another vision himself lying broken, the village burning, the people scattering. Both futures flickered, both possible. The chamber trembled, and the elder's voice rang out. "The second trial begins. Secrets have been shown. Now you must face choice. Your heart will decide if you rise or if you fall." Daniel's breath shook. The child held his hand tighter than ever. The rival alien's burning eyes fixed on him with hatred. The crystals hummed like 1,000 voices whispering in the dark. The chamber of secrets closed around him, and Daniel knew the true test was only just beginning. The night inside the alien village was not peaceful. The air was heavy. The fires burned low, and whispers moved from hut to hut. Everyone spoke of the human, the outsider, the one who had returned the lost child. But now the trial was coming, and it was unlike anything he had faced before. Jared did not sleep. The elders had told him. At dawn, the true test begins. No other words, no explanation. Only that strange look in their glowing eyes. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling of the small hut they gave him, listening to the alien wind move through the trees. Every sound felt strange, like the forest itself was alive and watching. When morning came, the elder staff struck the ground 3 times. The village gathered in silence. The child Jared had saved stood with his parents, watching closely. The elder spoke in a deep voice that carried across the circle. "Last night, you proved kindness," he said. "But kindness alone is not enough. A leader must show courage, wisdom, and strength. Now you must face the trial of the guardian." Jared frowned. He had no weapons, no armor, nothing but his own body. "What kind of trial?" he asked carefully. The elder's eyes narrowed. "The kind that reveals truth." The crowd parted. At the edge of the village stood a massive gate made of woven roots and glowing stones. Beyond it was a path leading into the forest, but not just any forest. The elder said its name with reverence. The Hollow Woods. Whispers ran through the aliens. Even the strongest among them shifted nervously. The hollow woods were forbidden to most, a place where the village's guardians tested the worth of those who sought leadership. No one entered unless called, and few ever returned the same. The elder looked at Jared. "You will walk into the hollow woods," he said. "You will not take food or water. You will not take company. Only your spirit will guide you. If you survive until the second sunrise, the woods themselves will decide if you are worthy." Jared's heart pounded. It sounded like madness, but he saw no choice. He looked at the child, who gave him a small nod, as if to say, "You can do this." And so Jared stepped toward the gate. The villagers chanted softly, a low, haunting rhythm. The gate opened with a groan. Cold air swept out, sharp, heavy, almost alive. He entered, and the gate closed behind him. Inside the hollow woods, the trees towered like pillars in a temple. Their bark glowed faintly with blue veins, pulsing as if blood ran through them. The ground was soft, covered in strange moss that gave off whispers when he stepped. Every direction looked the same, endless shadows, endless light woven together. He walked, hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time was strange here. He felt watched, not just by eyes, but by something larger, older. And then the whispers began. At first, he thought it was wind, but the sounds shaped into voices, familiar. Voices. His father's voice, sharp and demanding. "You are weak." Jared, always weak. He froze. His father had died years ago, but the words cut deep. Then another voice. His sister crying, "You left me when I needed you." His chest tightened. It was not real, he told himself. The woods were playing with his mind, but it felt real, painfully real. The shadows thickened. Something moved between the trees. Not one thing, but many. Glowing eyes, low growls, shapes that shifted. Between beast and spirit, they circled him, silent, waiting. Jared clenched his fists. He had no weapon, no shield, nothing but himself. But he remembered something. The child's eyes when he was found, the relief, the trust, the village watching. Him now, believing or doubting, he could not fail. The creatures lunged. Jared ducked, rolled, and grabbed a fallen branch. It was not much, but it was something. He swung, hitting one creature. It burst into mist, vanishing with a shriek. The others pulled back, watching, testing. He shouted into the woods, "I don't care what you show me. I will not stop. I've faced worse than shadows. If you want me broken, you'll have to kill me." The woods went silent. Even the whispers stopped. For a moment, Jared thought he had won. But then a single figure stepped from the trees. It was the child. The same child he had saved. Only now his eyes glowed brighter, and his voice was not his own. "You saved me once," child said, but his tone was deeper, older. "Now save yourself." The child raised a hand, and the forest around Jared began to shift. The ground split, roots writhed like serpents, and a path of fire opened in front of him. This was no simple trial. This was something far older, something that tested not just a leader, but a human soul. And Jared realized something terrifying. This was not about becoming chieftain. This was about proving if humans themselves were worthy of standing. Among these beings and the hollow woods had just begun to judge him. The alien hunters guided Ethan and the child Lyra deeper into the mountain caves. The air grew colder, and the sound of dripping water echoed through the darkness. Strange glowing crystals lit their way, casting blue light on the cave walls. Ethan noticed carvings on the walls, pictures of battles, rituals, and great alien leaders. One drawing caught his eye, a tall human-like figure holding the same staff he had seen in the village. His heart beat faster. "Why is there a human carved here?" he whispered. One of the hunters looked at him sharply. "Do not speak too loudly." The cave remembers every word. The words sent a chill down Ethan's spine. A cave that remembers? He wanted to laugh, but deep down, he felt it was true. They finally reached a wide chamber filled with an underground lake. The water was perfectly still, like a mirror. In the middle of the lake stood a stone platform with a glowing staff placed on top. "This is the Whispering Cave," one of the hunters said. "To be chosen, you must cross the water, take the staff, and return. But the water will test your spirit." Ethan looked at the lake. It looked harmless, but his instincts told him otherwise. He stepped onto a small raft made of crystal-like wood. As he pushed forward, the water rippled strangely. He heard voices dot at first. They were soft. "Ethan, Ethan." They sounded like echoes of his own thoughts. But then they grew louder, different, more personal. He heard his father's voice, calling him weak. He heard his own fear from years ago, when he almost drowned in a river as a child. He heard guilt about choices he had made, moments he never spoke about to anyone. The lake whispered every hidden memory, every regret. Ethan gritted his teeth. "You can't break me. I've faced worse." But then the whispers changed. They began to speak about Lyra. "She trusts you. She sees you as family. But if you fail, she will die. Do you want her blood on your hands?" The voices stabbed his heart. He looked back at Lyra on the shore, her wide eyes filled with worry. She didn't say anything, but her trust was clear. The raft shook violently, as if the lake was trying to pull him down. Dark shapes rose from the water figures, made of liquid, copies of himself, each one whispering his darkest fears. Ethan clenched his fists. Enough. He stood up on the raft, almost falling, and shouted, "I am not afraid of the past. I am not afraid of pain. I will protect her no matter what." The lake stilled. The whispers faded. The dark shapes dissolved back into water. Breathing hard, Ethan reached the stone platform. The glowing staff pulsed with light, as if waiting for him. He touched it. The staff felt warm, alive, and in that moment he heard a voice inside his head. "You have faced the whispers and did not break. But the true test is still ahead." Ethan lifted the staff. The crystals in the cave blazed with light, and the water around him glowed. He could feel every heartbeat, every breath, even the presence of the hunters watching him. He paddled back across the lake, this time with calm. When he stepped onto the shore, the hunters bowed their heads slightly. Even Lyra looked at him with awe. "You have taken the staff," one hunter said. "But remember, the cave only shows strength. It does not decide leadership. The village will judge." Ethan tightened his grip on the staff. The whispers had warned him. The true test was still coming, and deep inside, he knew what awaited him outside the cave would be far more dangerous than any whisper. The night was silent. Only the sound of the fire crackling in the middle of the alien village could be heard. Hundreds of villagers sat in a circle, their glowing eyes fixed on the human Ethan. The lost child he had saved stood beside him, smiling proudly. The elders of the village whispered to one another, their voices low but heavy with meaning. The head elder finally rose. His staff struck the ground, sending a deep echo through the air. "Human," the elder's voice carried power. "You have passed every trial. You showed kindness when you could have turned away. You showed courage when you could have run. You showed strength when danger came for you. But now, the final test begins." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Final test." The elder nodded. "The child you returned is not only a child. She is the daughter of our last chieftain. She is the heart of our people. To save her meant you carried our future in your arms. And now, you must choose, will you lead us?" The crowd gasped. Aliens murmured in their strange tongue. Ethan felt his chest tighten. Him? A chieftain of a species not his own? It felt impossible. But before he could speak, the elder lifted his staff again. "If you refuse, you may walk away free." No harm will come to you. But if you accept, you will never again be only human. You'll be one of us forever. The firelight flickered across Ethan's face. He thought of his old life on Earth, his lonely days, his endless wandering. Then he looked at the child, who stared at him with wide, trusting eyes. He remembered her tiny hand clutching his when she was afraid. Ethan's heart pounded. The villagers began to chant, low and deep. The ground itself seemed to hum. The sky shimmered with strange lights. Ethan realized this was no ordinary ceremony. It was something ancient, something binding. The child tugged his hand softly. "Please," she whispered, "we need you." Ethan closed his eyes. The choice weighed on him like a mountain. But deep inside, he already knew his answer. He stepped forward. "If I am truly worthy, then I will not walk away. I accept." The villagers erupted in a cry that shook the night sky. The elder struck the staff once more, and a wave of energy surged outward. The fire roared higher, turning blue and silver. Ethan felt something pierce into his very soul. His body trembled, but he did not fall. Strange patterns glowed across his skin marks of leadership, the sign of the chosen. His human body felt stronger, heavier, but also lighter, as if bound to the village itself. The elder's voice thundered. "From this moment, you are no longer outsider. You are Chieftain, the protector of our people, the bridge between human and alien." The villagers fell to their knees. Even the fiercest warriors bowed their heads. The child smiled through tears, hugging Ethan tightly. But then, the drums stopped. A shadow moved at the edge of the forest. Out of the darkness, massive creatures appeared, armored beasts with red eyes, enemies of the village. They had come to destroy, to test the strength of the new leader. The villagers gasped in fear. The elder turned to Ethan. "Chieftain, your first trial as leader begins now. If you fall, we all fall." Ethan stepped forward, gripping a spear handed to him. His glowing skin pulsed with new strength. The beasts roared, shaking the earth. For a brief second, silence fell. Then Ethan spoke, his voice steady, his eyes burning with determination. "You wanted a leader. Now you have one. Let them come." The aliens around him rose with renewed courage. Spears lifted, shields locked, voices roared in unison. The enemies charged, but the villagers stood firm, because now they had a leader who had chosen them. Human who saved a child had become the chieftain of an alien world. And under his command, they would fight not with fear, but with hope. The firelight blazed, the battle cry rose, and the night shook with destiny.